I was leaning up against an old sycamore tree, and I was near a creek deep in the woods, and that wasn't far from Helmsburg Road in Brown County, Indiana, and it was this beautiful, beautiful day. The sun was shining, the sky was blue, and it was cool out, and it was just gorgeous. And as I stood there, my friend Ed Wagler came over and grabbed me by the arm, and he said, "Jeff, I think we should pray." And we prayed. And then I gave Ed a hug, and I quickly got over to my car and drove up about a half mile to the cabin that September, that's my wife, September and I had rented up there near Friendship Cabin Road, and walked in through the door in the cabin, and I hugged September. And then I called my friend Judd Linville, who was at 40 Wall Street in New York City. And phone rang, he answered, and before I could say anything, he said, "Hey, Jeff, what's going on?" And I said, started to say something, and he cut me off, and he said, "I think there's a parade today. There's ticker tape coming down." And about that time, September had the TV on in the cabin, and that's about the time at about 9 o'clock, 9:03, that the second airplane hit the South Tower at the World Trade Center. And I told Judd what happened, and I got off the phone, and we started to pack up. And if we could, we'll hit the pause button right there. And I'll take you back 28 years before that. And about 28 years before that, what was that, September? It was 1973, right? 1973, September and I were seniors at Carmel High School. And after putting me through my paces for several months, September decided to let me be her boyfriend, and I thought that was really great. And I was on cloud nine there for a few months. And I will tell you, though, we were different, though. We had very different backgrounds, because September's family was one of the founding families of Carmel, right? So she was several generations in, and she had lived in the same house on the same street, actually Main Street in Carmel, for her whole life. And I, on the other hand, had moved to Carmel with my family when I started high school. And my 5 brothers and sisters like to tell people about how we had all grown up and been born in different cities, in different states, from Nebraska and Idaho to New York and West Virginia, and then finally to Indiana. So we had a different sense of home, and we had a different sense of place and being and that kind of thing, but I sure was crazy about her. That worked out for me. And as soon as we graduated, I was 17. I went to school in Annapolis, and I was determined to become a naval aviator. And at that point, I think September was determined to make sure that we got married when I got out of Annapolis. So we got engaged, because that's what people did back in the 70s, right? If they fell in love, young people actually planned on getting married. And so 3 days after I graduated, we went back to Indiana, and we got married in Carmel on Main Street in the backyard of the house that September grew up in. And I think that was about the best place we could have done that. But after that, we left the next day, and we didn't really stop traveling for about 23 years. We lived several places in the country, from Georgia to Texas, Florida, and just all over. Ended up in Atlanta. But every year for those 23 years, we would come back to Indiana to visit. And in fact, every Christmas we'd come back. And we did that because it was important to September and important for her to know that her 3 kids, our 3 kids, had a sense of place and being and a place to come back to. And that was Carmel, Indiana, at that house on Main Street. And that worked out for us. And at one point, I can remember we were living in Atlanta. My second daughter was a senior in high school, and she said, "Dad, I've attended 11 schools, and I think this one should be the last." So we worked that out. She graduated there in Atlanta, and then she ended up at Hanover College with my other daughter, Megan, and they both graduated from Hanover. But come along a few years later, so now it's 2001, and I've got an office in New York City. I've got an office in Atlanta, and if you were one of the thousands of people that year who got an American Express corporate card, you got a letter from American Express signed by me welcoming you to American Express and promising you that we would provide you the best travel services that you could get anywhere in the world, that you could be confident that if anything ever went wrong or anything ever happened, you'd be able to get to an American Express office and we'd be able to help you. And I felt good about that. So you're probably wondering how I ended up in, or how September and I ended up in Brown County on September 11th in 2001. Well, pretty simple, really. Over the years, all those visits back to Indiana, of course, we visited Brown County, and we ended up buying some property on Helmsburg Road. We call that property September's Forest. Now it's about 64 acres of beautiful woods, beautiful place. And in 2001, we thought we could build a cabin on that property and have a vacation cabin so that when we came to visit in Indiana, we'd have a place to stay. And I convinced September that before we built the cabin, we needed to dig a big pond. That way we'd have a better idea where the cabin should be on the property. And I don't think I really convinced September of that, but she allowed me that notion, and she let me get started on the pond. So it was about September 4th when a guy named Ed Wagler, who I mentioned earlier in the story, called me up and he said, "Jeff," he said, "I'm going to start on your pond on Monday, and if you get up here to Brown County, we'll walk the property, we'll get up at sunrise, and we'll take a look around, and things go well, I'll let you drive the excavator because I've seen you eyeing the excavator and I know you want to drive it." So I thought about it for a minute and I said, "You know, Ed, I really wish I could, but I'm sorry, I'm too busy. And I've got a meeting in New York City that morning." And I remember that he paused and just for a second, and then he said, "Yes, sir, that sounds important." And he paused again, and then he said, "But if you change your mind, I'll be out there." And you know, the rest of the day I thought about that, and I thought about him saying, "If you change your mind, I'll be out there." And I thought about it enough, and finally I decided I'd change my mind. And I called my boss in New York, Judd, and I said, "You know, Judd, I never do this, but I think I'm going to miss that meeting in New York on Monday morning." He said, "Well, Jeff, if you think that's important," and that's what he said. He said, "If you think that's important to miss the meeting, that's fine with me. You just call in whenever you want." And I did that, and then I told September we were going to go to back to Indiana for the weekend. And we flew up to Indianapolis, and then we came down to Brown County, had this wonderful weekend, beautiful weather, great time. And then that Monday morning, I went over to the property, and I got with Ed, and we walked the property, and we looked at where the pond would be. And, you know, it was just this wonderful, beautiful blue sky morning. And then I was leaning up against that sycamore tree and standing there near the creek, and felt the old flip phone in my pocket vibrate, and I got it out, and sure enough, it was September, and I answered the phone, and she said, "Jeff, an airplane just flew into the North Tower of the World Trade Center." And that's when Ed grabbed me and said, "Jeff, I think we ought to pray." And we did. And the rest of the day, we drove back to Atlanta, and really September did quite a bit of the driving. And I called the rest of my teammates who weren't in New York City, And we tried to fill that promise that we talked about. We actually had literally thousands and thousands of business travelers out all over the world when that happened. And all of them were stuck because there were no airplanes flying. There was nobody going anywhere because nobody knew what was going to happen next. It was if you were there and you can remember, it was a remarkable time, a terrible time. And believe it or not, in about 17 hours, we found everybody. We knew where they were. And we were able to either get them a place to stay or extend their stay or help them contact the people that they needed to contact to make sure that they knew they were okay. And we felt good about that. Like I said, felt good. Next weeks and months were a little bit different because we had lost several colleagues in the World Trade Center, and we celebrated their lives. And we also had to move the headquarters of American Express to New Jersey. We had to take everybody out of the World Financial Center, where our headquarters was, while that building was repaired and rebuilt. And that was a big deal. So, I heard what Letty said about when she was talking about that moment when she and Dell were looking over that scenic vista. And I think she said there was no, like one moment or no magic moment or particular epiphany. And I can tell you for me, and I think for September, that was true too. I don't think we had this big moment where we decided, oh, the world's changed and we're going to change their lives. I think we just understood it. So we didn't have this big conversation about what to do next or how the world was changing. We just knew that we needed to change with the world. And we decided then that we would, that vacation cabin we're going to build could be our permanent home. And my son Ian is sitting right over there. Ian was in the 8th grade. He's awful young for his advanced age now, right? Awful young looking. But anyway, we went to Ian and said, Ian, would you like to go to school in Brown County with about 300 or 400 classmates, or would you like to go to high school here in Alpharetta, Georgia, in the suburb of Atlanta with about 3,000 classmates? And he jumped right on that idea to go to Brown County. And so by the time school was out, or when school started in September of 2002, we had moved back, and Ian started school in Brown County. And they called him Georgia for a few years, and eventually they forgot about that, though, didn't they? Right? And you became just a regular Brown County guy. But we made that move, and fast forward to today, right? So for the last 15 years, my wife, September, who is sitting over there behind Ian, has been a volunteer fireman and a assistant fire chief and a first responder in Brown County. And she and her mom, who's sitting beside her over there, who is also a fireman and is still on the fire department at 89 years old, have touched the lives of hundreds of people in Brown County at the worst moments, and I think helped a little, right? Or maybe helped a lot. And they found a place, and we feel really good about that. And for me, for the last 10 years, I have been doing this thing with my family and friends, that this big adventure that we call Big Woods, and now Hard Truth Hills and that kind of stuff. And for me, it's been a dream because, and the biggest adventure, because we're building an enterprise, but we're building a culture, right? We're building a kind of a thing there that kind of transcends the business part of it, and is more about the experience that we help people have when they come to visit Brown County. So it's a wonderful thing, and I can tell you that I still go visit that big old sycamore tree a lot, and I think about these things, and I stand near the creek, And I'm there in the deep woods that we call September's Forest now, and I'm thankful for every minute and every day that we're here. And I'm really proud to be from Indiana, to be a Hoosier, and to have the wonderful family and friends that I do. And thank you for letting me be here tonight.